doing here?
You thought I would not know, but I do.
You just read some lights. It's my job.
This would be a bad place to be a prisoner in, wouldn't it? Goodbye, Dave.
Wow, this was episode 3 of the quarantine series of our event video master Sven from Rotes Leuchten. He's trapped in the home office with his camera. And as you can see, the situation is slowly going crazy. Good morning, early birds. Welcome to Creative Mornings Berlin. I'm Jürgen Siebert, your host since August 2011, when we celebrated our very first event. Today is our 97th event. We're really proud of that. None of this would be possible without your continuous interest in our activities and your strength to get up early to either listen to our lectures or to give one yourself. Additionally, it is our 3rd online event. On the one hand, it's a pity that we can't meet in person. On the other hand, we learned since our first online event that this form can provide just as much fun and knowledge and participation. The video technology offers some advantages. So the Creative Morning team and me like to make sure you know how to see and interact with each other. We're going to invite you all to turn your camera on if you'd like, of course, and share your wonderful faces with us. Don't be shy. Throughout the call, there will be some opportunities for you to chime in. The raise hand feature is just one great gesture you can use for this. As you see on the slide, to raise your hand, click on participants at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then in the pop-up window, click the blue hand. To unraise your hand, simply click it again. Let's practice this feature with a little game. Question. Who is calling in from Berlin? Please raise your hand. I must do a screenshot. It looks fantastic. Counter question. Raise your hand if you're not calling in from Berlin. I count 20 people. Well done. Are you as excited about this feature as I am? Thank you very much. Feel also free to give snaps and jazz hands throughout the call. It means a lot to those of us in front of the screen. You can also send some love in the chat box throughout the call. Our co-moderator Wipke will take care of your feedback and we will answer your questions later with the speaker together. All chapters organize their monthly event under a common theme. The theme this month is Insecure. The theme is always proposed by one of our Creative Mornings chapters, and the illustration is done by a local artist. In this case, it's Rachel Sinclair. The idea of Insecure came from our colleagues in Louisville. Here you can see a snapshot of a recent event they celebrated at the Waterfront Botanical Gardens. At the microphone, this is Ben Terry, the host of Creative Mornings, Louisville. You may already knew that we record our lectures on video, including this one, but we also make a nice photo album of every event that you can find on Flickr. Here's some of the photos we took at the last physical event in March, but this time we are not together in one room, so that our photographer Norman Posson can do his work as he usually do it. That's why I would like to get a selfie from you, just like you are sitting in front of the screen and follow our event. If you agree that we publish it in our Flickr album, just send it to this email address, berlin@creativemornings.com. You will find this address also in the chat later on. I will publish it there. Creative Mornings not exist without the great support of our 3 global sponsors who keep the headquarters in New York alive, where half a dozen colleagues do a great job. Let's start with MailChimp, Creative Mornings official global partner for marketing. We use it for our mails and newsletters. They have a great offer for everyone who wants to learn and improve their work. MailChimp recently bought a British bi-monthly magazine called Courier Media, and they're sharing the content now of Courier Media. And I will send you a link in the chat later on where you can read, where you can subscribe a newsletter that will provide you with weekly news and helpful tips. Next one is WordPress, our official global partner for web publishing. We have a nice series that we created together and published with WordPress. It's the Own Your Content series. And I think this is an important attitude you should have as a creative person, that you always own your content and get paid for it. And I will send you a link also in the chat later on where you can follow our stories and virtual interviews and tips from professional creatives. Finally, Basecamp, our youngest global sponsor that joined Creative Mornings in March. This is our global partner for project management. They start a new thing, and this is really interesting. They will start it in the 15th of June. It's a new mail platform for emails, because we all think email is still helpful. And what I've heard so far, it should have the power of Gmail, but much nicer design, much nicer user interface. It's called hey.com, and I recommend to just visit their website and request an invitation to be a tester of hey.com. Penultimate introductory slide now. We are happy if you share photos or quotes from this event via our social media channels. And Twitter and Instagram, we have both. They have both the same handle at Berlin CM. Please use the hashtag CMBR. This is what you can expect in the next 40 minutes. We have a 20-minute talk, 25-minute talk that will start immediately. After this, will be followed by a 10-minute Q&A with Wiebke. Wiebke is collecting all your questions in the chat, but feel free to jump in with your microphone and with your video to ask direct questions to the speakers. No problem. We have the technology for it. And we have 2 30-second pitches, and none from me this time. Now, I'd like you to please welcome our speaker, today's speaker, Mark Magellan.
Not quite the same as real applause, but it feels nice. And thanks, Jürgen, and thanks everyone for having me.
Thanks, Mark.
My breakout room was so lovely, and it did remind me of something that I wanted to say. I'll be sharing some of my experience and hopefully wisdom over the next 25 to 30 minutes, but I hope that you'll also share in the chat. I really believe that our collective wisdom in this moment especially is a powerful thing. So please don't be shy. I'll be doing my best to be talking to you during it. And again, expectation setting. This will be about 30 minutes. So again, hey, and I'm Mark Magellan, designer, storyteller, activist, and probably most importantly, human. I wrote this talk a few months back, And a few weeks ago, I scrapped the entire thing with COVID in mind. To be honest, I almost rewrote it again a week ago based on what just happened in my country, in the US. So I want to be raw with you for a second and just tell you that my heart aches. I just arrived back from DC 2 days ago. And to be honest, I don't even know if I should be speaking now. But I do know that after this session, I'm going to go back to listening to those who have endured systemic injustice their entire lives. I'm going to seek out more education. I'm going to focus on what allyship truly means. And I'm going to return to stillness and look to others to guide my action forward. So I wanted to start there. Today, I still do want to talk about design and creativity, but it felt pretty short-sighted to focus on solely the design of products or experiences when really insecurity means a whole lot more to us in this moment. In just a few months, so much has changed in a way that made me revisit an entire life of insights. I wanted to see if things still held up, which I think they do to some extent, but I really wanted to design this session for you all, to meet you where you are, because I think that's really at the heart of storytelling. I think it's about empathy. So in the name of that game, I'm also going to share some personal stories. So I hope that you'll hold some space for me to be a bit vulnerable, and that feels okay to everyone. Yeah, that's that. So I think it's safe to say that right now we're going through something. Insecurity is probably putting it lightly. Call it a trauma, but even that word falls a little flat because I think it's experienced so uniquely by each of us. And I think that's the powerful thing about trauma, is that however we're experiencing it is real. And we should acknowledge that and lean into that. So that kind of brings me to my first lesson that insecurity has taught me about life. And that's acknowledging how you're feeling, naming it, is the first step to growth. So before I explain, I do want to check in with you and try to get in the habit of sharing in the chat. So on a 1 to 10 scale, 10, you are in flow, you are amazing. 1, you feel like shit. Where are you? How are you feeling? Go ahead and write it down, share it, and don't judge it. Got some 7s, some 8s. Holy, wow, 10. Share your magic, Sarah. 6, 5, some 8s. Julia's a 5. 5 to Martha. So now I also want you to think about something that you're carrying right now, something that feels extra heavy. Maybe it's something that's making you feel insecure. And I want you, again, if you're feeling brave, to share that in the chat window. So what's one thing right now that's maybe taking you from a 10 to a 7, or from an 8 to a 2? I'll give everyone just a sec. I can go ahead and share mine, actually, if that's helpful. I've been totally preoccupied with not knowing recently. My life has changed drastically in the last couple of months, and I'll go a bit more into that. But again, acknowledging that feeling, that emotion without judgment, for me has been such a beautiful step. So I'm looking at the chat. Dream Lou, not being able to see my friends and family. Chris, pressure. Sarah, all the injustice in the world. Bianca, mentally flat. These are beautiful. Denise, not knowing. Bernadette, the profound injustice predominantly in the US right now. Yeah. Economic situation. Thanks, Jennifer. Feeling helpless. I'm not sure what my role is as an artist. Well, I hope it's to create. Sina, feeling some people out of reach, too far away. Again, feel free to continue to share. And I really do believe that in sharing, it might feel strange for us, but even the process of reading is so healing. So I'm going to dive back in, but feel free to stay in this chat together. But I was talking about acknowledging the feeling, and I think one of the greatest lessons I ever learned from my mentor at IDEO, Coletta Stafford, a few years back was this. She said, Mark, just name the thing. And if you could just maybe mute your mic. Perfect. She said, name the thing, just acknowledge it. So before kicking off a meeting, let's say that I'm not feeling myself that day. I'll say just that. I'll say, hey, everyone, I'm a 3 on a 10 scale. I left my cape at home today. I just wanted to say that. I think what that does is it gives others a window into the emotion, and it gives you space to feel it as well. Sometimes it's as easy as that. You feel better immediately after naming it. Other times, like now, you don't, but at least you've defined the thing for yourself and for others. So this is my first step to existing within insecurity. So just 90 days ago, I was back in Berlin. I had just signed a contract to go to Abu Dhabi. It was a beautiful project, mission-driven, beautiful people. And after 2 weeks of arriving and being quarantined in my hotel, they asked me in the middle of the night, once we were being evacuated, which is important, where do you want to go? Berlin is where my apartment is. DC is where my family is. And I wasn't sure if this was what this was. So I chose DC. And I woke up days later in a place that I hadn't spent more than a week in for 15 plus years. It was a place that brought with it a lot of pain, of love, uncertainty, but mostly a whole lot of memory. So I want to tell you a bit about that story. I grew up in Vienna, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and some of my earliest memories were of summer nights. They literally seem to go on forever. I don't know what it is about them. And I think that this emptiness, the kind of mixture of the arid air and almost like the croaking of the cicadas, I think this emptiness has been one of my greatest inspirations in design. I think from a very early age, I lacked a sense of belonging in my community, in my school, in my body. I always felt like an anomaly. I was an athlete at the time, but I really felt more drawn to the arts, to poetry and film, and I had a lot of feelings, which is often rejected in these kind of strange machismo cultures. Empathy was always my superpower. But I think the thing is with superpowers is that they take time to harness. But from an early age, I think I always had a big question. It was something that got me out of bed in the morning. Later, I would put it into words. How might we use design as a vehicle for belonging and transformation? As a kid, that meant designing adventures for my friends, adventures where everyone felt included. I really always looked at myself before the movie Amelie as that, someone who is making the mundane magical. And I think if you trace that thread, you can pull it all the way from then to now. From studying dialogue and design in grad school, to the work I do with the Anywhere Collective, where we're dedicated to designing for connection between people, to working at the global design firm IDEO, where I focused on storytelling as a vehicle for change and inclusion, to my current work at the creative agency Proud Humans, which helps organizations connect to purpose, their story, and by virtue of that, to each other. So you see, belonging, it's always been there. It's been inspiring me, it's been challenging me, it's been motivating me. But more than that, it's been the ever-present hole in my heart. It's been the beautiful hollow, like Virginia summer nights. The thing that I can't ever quite fill within myself. It's what stays with me, always. It didn't start while knocking doors in the blistering heat of an Oregon summer over a decade ago. It's something that I've felt deeply connected to my entire life. And I think that's the thing. As designers, our big questions aren't just relevant for us in the work we do in the external world. At least they shouldn't be. Authenticity in design means that we're connected to our inner worlds too. That we can trace our curiosity for this challenge back to our own lives. That if we don't pursue this worthy adversary, we know damn well we'll never be quite whole as humans. Of course, right now I'm talking about purpose, and I think we need it now more than ever before. It's what helps us not just cope, but thrive within this insecurity. It's what brings meaning to our life and keeps us grounded. So for lesson number 2, purpose grounds us within insecurity. The thing with purpose is I focus on 3 levels of it to simplify. The first, personal purpose, what gets you out of bed in the morning. The second, professional purpose, your team or organization's reason to exist beyond making profit. And third, societal. And all orgs these days should be considering the impact they're having on our planet. If you're focusing on making an impact on a social scale, you really need to have done the work yourself too. So I really believe it starts with you. As Gandhi said, you must be the change you want to see in the world, which resonates a lot right now, especially. Also, no matter what level you're focusing on, purpose isn't something you only aspire to. Many companies think it's some forward-thinking exercise, but it exists already in the stories we tell, in those of triumph and joy and pride. So when helping individuals or companies find purpose with proud humans, I often begin by asking a simple question: what gets you out of bed in the morning? So I want to ask you that very quickly. What gets you out of bed in the morning from a personal level? Go ahead and share in the chat. We'll take a second. Hope, God, coffee, my startup, giving back, contributing. Bianca, knowing I'll learn something today. Katya, curiosity, the wish to learn, Minecraft, discovering, my daughter. These are so cool. Curiosity to write my novel, inspiring people, learning new stuff. My dog, Will, longing to connect, the people I am working with. My cat's sitting on my face. Perfect segue. So you see, purpose is the thing that's existed deep in our hearts. It's the thing inspiring us, our teams, and our organizations. It isn't just the mountaintop, it's the full journey. It's where you've been and where you want to go. Also, and really important, purpose doesn't just consider you, it considers those you're serving. So next, we often ask, who are you serving in the world, and how are you impacting their lives? I'd love to ask you that too. Who are you serving in the world, and what impact are you trying to have on those people's lives? Giving love, serving community and encouraging connection. That's beautiful. Tosh, my family and friends. Lovely. Stephanie, I'm connecting people. Lou, empowering purpose-driven individuals to dream and take action. Dream facilitation. Kalinda, teaching my daughter how to be happy. Sarah, inspiring others to do their thing and be creative. empowering people, Deus, serving those who have had enough of life, doing life alone. Again, I wish I could spend even more time reading these because they're so amazing. But I want to be conscious of time, trusting creative confidence. It's beautiful. Helping others get to their full potential as creators, let people know they're not alone. These are awesome. Encourage people's sense of wonder. I hate to jump back in, but design by nature is an act of service. It isn't about us, it's about what we can do for others in service of our planet. What beautiful new realities we can bring to life for our friends, our family, our community, and society. But it has to come from within us. So if you look, I believe that purpose kind of exists at the heart of these two questions. One, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Two, what impact are you having on those you're serving in the world? What you just did there, if you were doing that for your team or your organization, you would have just had the ingredients of your purpose. From there, and to oversimplify drastically, I'm going to give you 3 tips on how to bake those together, how to get the poetry just right of those words. And you can write these down and return to them later. Number 1, I ask people to focus on the verb. So IDEO's purpose is to create disproportionate impact through design. They chose the verb create. Tesla is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. They don't see themselves as a necessary or as just one piece to the puzzle. They're a necessary catalyst toward this movement. So again, the verb matters. It captures your aspiration in an actionable way. 2, I always tell people to make it epic. Purpose, as I've said before, is the worthy adversary. It's the thing you'll never quite reach, the emptiness you'll never lives of the world's consumers. Will they ever get to that? Probably not, but it's pretty noble. 2, Patagonia, their purpose is to save the planet. Again, will they ever save the planet? Probably not, but it's that worthy adversary, the thing that always gets them out of bed in the morning. My 3rd tip is make it true. People have a great bullshit detector. Don't test it, be authentic. So here's a good purpose statement. To inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, in one neighborhood at a time. Of course, that couldn't be Nike's, but it could be Starbucks. That's their mission. So finding purpose is an amazing step to existing in uncertainty and insecurity, but of course, it isn't a cure-all. I still have days where I'm fucking lost and confused and scared and alone. And the thing is, I think I've always felt that I've had to hide these feelings, that there's no room for weakness in my life or my line of work. I'm also someone who has had a long relationship with depression as a kid and as a young adult. But I always felt like with that too, there was no room for it in my life. I was a light. I always had to be a light. So I would fake it or I'd send those feelings below. What people saw of me was often starkly different from how I felt. And as a consequence, these repressed emotions calcified into pockets of trauma that stuck to my bones. Years would go by, 25 years to be exact, and to oversimplify my journey drastically through travel and music and friendship and design and psychedelic drugs and work. And it took a lot of work. I began to reframe everything. I spent a lot of time with my feelings and I stopped fighting. And once I did that, I found that I loved what I saw. I loved every part of me, especially the darkness, because it wasn't just heavy and scary. It was the thing that allowed me to experience moments of lightness and grace. It was what gave me empathy and intuition. And together these things made me complex and flawed and beautiful and alive. And then about 4 years ago, after years of not being controlled by these emotions, I relapsed. I often say that my halo came down to choke me. I thought I was healed, which is such a funny frame when it comes to these topics. I was drowning in a stressful project in SF. I wasn't sleeping, and then all of a sudden I snapped. I was back in it, completely one with that desperate hollow. And what did I do? Man, I tried to get out of it. I tried to sleep. I tried to work out harder. I tried to meditate harder, which is totally counterintuitive to meditation. I totally lost trust in the process. And what I found was that the more I fought, the worse I felt, the deeper the hole became. I don't think I've ever felt so insecure in my life. I had this strange anxiety that if I didn't interfere, I wouldn't get out of it. It went on for weeks, but literally felt like an eternity. And then one day, I realized something in my next lesson. The more we fight it, the more we suffer from it. The more we fight our anxiety, the more anxious we are. The more we fight our insecurity, the more insecure we are. I found that when I stopped fighting and started trusting, I almost immediately began to unravel the web that paralyzed me. I found relief, and that lesson has been a godsend. I think really too, it applies to creativity and inspiration too. My favorite poet, John Keats, once said, "Inspiration should come naturally as leaves on a tree, or not come at all." The more we fight for inspiration, the less inspired we are. I believe in any creative field, if we fight for the thing, for that source, we'll never find it. Sometimes all we have to do is look up, be present, start listening, ask more beautiful questions, and enjoy the rhythm of the dance instead of forcing our pace toward the finale. I always tell teams to go seek analogous inspiration, look for guidance in unfamiliar places, take different ways home, listen to new albums, talk to strangers, accept the insecurity of not knowing. And this leads me to my next lesson. Disequilibrium leads to new ways of seeing. Now, perhaps more than ever before, I'm learning how to embrace these moments of insecurity, to lean into them and feel the feelings that come along with them. Take travel, for instance. So I've been living on the road, partly nomadic for about 2.5 years. So my normal is feeling uprooted and unstable. But isn't it after that initial jolt of the unfamiliar that we find something novel and beautiful? A new sound or taste, some new perspective. Embracing discomfort is what shifts paradigms. Another example is the design process. So as I said, I spent about 4 years at IDEO in San Francisco, and Disequilibrium was baked into the way we worked. In design, and this is no news to you all, there's a stage just after inspiration and research called synthesis. Maybe you spent weeks or months out in the field collecting the pieces to the puzzle and all of the data. Then undoubtedly there comes a point when you need to form patterns to make sense of the shit mess that's right in front of you. If you ask any designer what this feels like, they will say it feels like shit. It feels uncomfortable, it's anxiety-ridden, it's messy, but it's part of the process. It's what leads to insights. Science explains this too. In a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Thomas Kuhn explored this very phenomena. If you've heard the word paradigm, well, you owe it to this dude and to this book. Before the book, the popular belief of science was that it evolved over time. Knowledge was about gradual, incremental growth. Kuhn rejected this. He believed in a more radical concept, that paradigms or ways of seeing the world were replaced in an almost revolutionary and abrupt way. In other words, entire fields or ways of seeing would be disrupted by an anomaly and thrown into, as he says, an acute state of personal distress, anxiety, massive insecurity, uncertainty. Like that one day in the 17th century when someone said, actually, I don't think the Earth is at the center of the universe. Maybe it's that big ball of gas. Those who claimed this, like Galileo, were actually charged for heresy. People were so uncomfortable by these ideas. But as truths have a way of doing, the anomaly, that new way of seeing or experiencing the world, would start a revolution of thought. And the heliocentric model of the universe would be born. Going back to synthesis, Kuhn would tell us to embrace these moments of disequilibrium, of unsettling insecurity. So instead of seeing now as lost time cooped up in our apartments, we could see it as a prologue to this next chapter of human history. So kind of like when I said, don't fight it, now I'm saying, embrace it. Try to swim within it as much as you can, because often that feeling, that thing that's at the heart of insecurity, means that you're onto something, a new breakthrough or insight. Maybe you're about to form a new mental model, to see differently, to work differently, to exist differently. So there's a skill at the core of this that helps us move from disequilibrium to sense making, and I'll go quickly here. But it's asking more poignant questions. So at IDEO, we often use a simple frame. How might we? How, it's curious, might, it's generative, and we, it's inclusive. It's an invitation. So let's think about COVID for a second. Instead of asking, what costs can we cut to still survive as a business? We might ask, how might we find new opportunities in the decline of this part of our business? Or instead of asking, what does a meeting look like during the time of COVID? We might ask, how might we design meetings that inspire and nourish us? So disequilibrium really is what leads to innovation, and that is a powerful thing. My mouth's dry, so I'm going to keep on drinking water. So up to this point, you're probably saying, lovely dude in theory, but my brain hurts, or I'm feeling all alone in this. And I promise you, I'm with you. I'm going to tell you another quick story. Back in November, I found myself in the emergency room for a weekend in Berlin. I was on the way to an adventure in Romania, partnering with an amazing activist organization there, and I threw up in the trash can on the way to the airport from pain in my abdomen. Needless to say, I didn't go to the forest, but to the ER. I waited for almost 12 hours before seeing anyone with a needle in my arm. I don't really know why they put a needle in your arm when they first see you. It's actually awful. But there was a lot of confusion that day, very little security, partly because I couldn't understand a lot of the specialists, partly because I had shitty expat insurance, but mostly because I was 5,000 miles away from everyone that I loved. There was one person there that day, though, who kept me together. My friend Mikey, I don't know if he's here today, but maybe he'll watch this. But he sat with me the entire time. He brought cheese and bread and some weird German sweets. And in that moment, I realized something. I had been doing it on my own a lot the previous 2 years. And that was cool. I left San Francisco and IDEO because I sought independence and autonomy. But in that moment, I kind of had a coming to Jesus moment. And that leads me to my next lesson. Relationships are at the core of everything. They are the lifeblood of all things. They're the solid ground beneath us in the sea of insecurity. In design, relationships are what allow us to solve thorny problems in collaboration. Because really, and I believe this so much, especially in this time, all of us are stronger than any one of us. If we want to solve the complex challenges of today, be it the environment, systems of oppression, this pandemic, we need each other. Personally, we don't need a billion of these relationships or even multiple handfuls. If you're lucky, you have this. I think these are the people that help you navigate the rocky waters of life. So find them and invest in them. I have an So we're going to go to slide 14, which is a quote. So life is flux, right? It's insecurity. We know that now especially, but really it's always been that way. We're just holding a super powerful mirror up right now. This quote comes from Alan Watts in the book, The Wisdom of Insecurity. If you don't know him, check him out. Check out this book. He's often credited for helping to bring Eastern philosophy to the West. In this book, he argues that the universe is inherent. But when we separate ourselves, our ego, from that force, from the inevitability of the dance, we suffer, period. This effort in saying, I must go on, or I don't want to feel this, by even saying that, that separates us from life and drives our insecurity. It might sound like a cliche, but staying in flow for me is everything, not fighting against life's fluidity, but instead going with it. So for my next and second to last lesson, go with the flow, join the dance. At IDEO, one of our most important values is talk less, do more. Simple, but so exquisite when you see a team adhering to this. It invites a bias toward action. Instead of standing still, figuratively and literally, and postulating about the future, we build shit. We prototype, we fail quickly, we don't resist the wave of the movement, we ride it. Think about flow states, or when you're totally in your power, connected to the present moment. This feeling and reconnecting with that, even in this time, is everything for me. So when I'm feeling anxious some weeks or insecure, I get back into flow. Have a think after this talk of what flow looks like to you, and what are the things you can do to get yourself back into that. For me, flow comes from service, supporting others. So to get out of the fireworks of my own head and to get back into flow, I connect with people. My 3 things: 1, as I just said, connect with humans, ask good questions, be listened to, dialogue, it's magic. 2, I get my blood flowing at the gym. I walk or run or ride a bike. 3, I plan mini adventures, because when you're feeling stagnant, sometimes all you need is a plan. So if there's one thing you take away from this talk, and this isn't the final thought, it's this: If we are living in an impartial universe of constant flux and insecurity, we're afforded a choice to dance within its fluidity or resist and feel like shit. So again, choose the dance, go with the flow. So now for my final lesson before the Q&A, and it's a build on the previous and really on everything. Don't skip, sorry. And really everything I've said up to this point. Don't just dance, but create space for insecurity. There's a symbol that I quite like. It's on everyone's keyboard. It's the parenthetical. The album cover for one of my favorite bands, Sigur Rós. They have an Untitled album where this is on the cover. And in this album, the lead singer Jonesy actually made up a language called Hopelandic. It's essentially all vowels. He believed that his voice was powerful as an instrument. And what was cool was that inside the CD booklet, during the time when people actually bought CDs, every song, instead of having lyrics, had parentheses. And it invited you to fill in your own meaning, to write your own poetry. A lot of great art does this. Think of a film that you saw, that when the credits rolled, you just sat there and stared at the screen as the exit music played. We call this thing negative capability. And that's when we're capable of existing within uncertainties, mysteries, doubt, insecurities, without any irritable reaching after fact or reason. About 6 years ago, I started an art collective in San Francisco. Again, we saw ourselves as real-life Amelies. We did events like Sonder, where we would rent out a warehouse and we would bring hundreds of strangers together for a night of connection. Sonder is a word made up from the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. It's the realization that others around you are living a life as rich and complex as your own. So people would show up and be split up from their partners, from their friends, from their family, and they would go through this 8-part immersive experience. The thing was, they weren't just passive observers. They were active participants. As any experienced designers do, we created the sandbox. We gave them the tools, but then they were meant to create something out of that, to fill in their own poetry within our parenthetical. The basic axiom behind this entire thing is that when we create space for ourselves and for others, we are then invited to fill in meaning. And that meaning is important. It's the new rules that will dictate what we're doing today. So we would get people into that acute personal distress where they're a little shaky and insecure and have them make sense of it. So I ask you, how do we create space for insecurity? Literally, space. How do we create space for people to create meaning within this chaos? How do we give ourselves permission to struggle? How do we design moments for us to flourish even within this time? I think, and this is important, that creativity and innovation and change, they come from the uncertain, from the messy, from the struggle, from the insecure. So my final words to you are these. I know times are tough, and I'm right there with you, but I really believe with all of my heart that the more we acknowledge it, the more we deepen our relationships, the more beautiful questions we ask, the more we create space, the stronger we'll come out of this together. So thanks for listening. And now I think we're jumping to the Q&A. Oh, here's my contact. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. I can't see a lot of your faces, but I know there are such beautiful souls here, so don't hesitate. And again, thanks for listening. I'm sorry that went a bit over time.
Thank you so much, Mark, for this wonderful, very inspiring talk.